Hey guys, so I'm here to talk about my video vlog for my EMDR session, talking about my therapy. So this was week 2 going into EMDR therapy, and the previous week I was really nervous to go there because I was nervous to start EMDR, and so that day, I'm just going to start out talking about my day because it has stuff to do with the session later that we talked about. So I went to the DMV in the morning. I have heavy anxiety when I go to the DMV because there's a lot of people there, and I don't like to wait in lines and have people close to me and behind me. And I don't really want someone to touch me, and it's just the place where that can happen. So I booked an appointment, but there's still a line to wait for the appointment line. And so I got there, and there was a male that went in back of me, and I just tried to stay out of the line. I was just upset that like people were so close to me. Just like I just don't like to be touched because it's triggering. So he was just in back of me, and then whenever I would move, he would move. So it was really triggering, and it caused me to have like a little bit of a panic attack, and I like cried, but I like held myself together at the DMV because I'm not going to start a scene around all these people. So, I'm just crying through my glasses. And then eventually I got to the front of the line, just was super irritated by him. Sure. And it's just some of the side effects of my PTSD. So, there's that. And I was able to like get home, but I was just like irritated, but I was trying not to let it affect my day. So then I get home, and then I have like a pretty much easy day, just working on my blog a little bit, and then it's time for therapy, and I allow myself a little bit more time to get to therapy this time because the last session I had sideswiped my car on the pole because I had so much anxiety and I wasn't necessarily paying that much attention to the pole, and I just was trying to get to therapy, and unfortunately I made a mistake and had a little sideswipe with my mirror and stuff. So this time I allowed myself extra time to get to therapy and to find a good parking spot so that I could just not have anxiety going into the session as much. So I found a spot on the street because sometimes it's easier for me to parallel park, surprisingly. And then I got to my therapy session. So I got to my therapy session. It started out good, like good energy going into it. I was pretty much excited. Well, not necessarily excited, but I was ready for it in a sense. I was ready to start this healing process. So I got to my therapy session, and it just kind of started out talking about like what my highs and lows were of the week, like a normal talk therapy session. So we started out talking about that. Then we targeted what were the main triggers, what do I really need to focus on during the session. So we made a point to focus on my side and like getting grabbed. And then so we went back to the bar, which was what prompted me to go back to EMDR therapy. And so we started talking about the attack, and then went into the bar. So we started out where John grabbed me by the waist, and at this time I have my buzzers in my hand, and I am just starting to go through my trauma. And so I start to go through John grabbing me by the waist, and then him looking me in the eyes and saying, "Do you remember me?" But I started out by the parking lot first and then worked my way up to that a little bit. As I got to that point in my therapy session, I just was able to see that vision so vividly. And so, it was very hard. I was shook for a minute. So I'm going to take a moment. Okay, so coming back to that, I just had to get a glass of water because sometimes just drinking water helps get oxygen to your brain if you're taking little sips, and it helps you get out of something a little bit. So I just had to do that real quick because it is really hard for me to talk about this right now. Even though I talk about it in podcasts and news articles and etc., whatever, it's just therapy is a different thing, and it's extremely hard for me to talk about it because it's bringing out what I'm like pushing under, kind of, and just like making everything so vivid and real. And when you're going through it, you can just see like things so clearly. And then in that therapy session, I was just able to see John's face when he grabbed me by the waist just so clearly. And it's just, that's hard. It's just such a hard thing to go through and go back through your trauma and deal with it. So that's why I have to take a moment sometimes. But going back to therapy, so I was able to see that, and then I went back to the bar and then kind of correlated the two, saw the differences, and if I had just like a thought, like I would have a thought like, okay, the touch is different or something, and then I would go with that. And then it would bring up like another thought, and sometimes it would bring me back to like John, even in the trauma, or I would go to like just different parts that would remind me of the certain like the trigger, I guess, or like the thought, wherever that ran with. I'm still trying to like digest everything, but that session, it was extremely hard for me to get through. I broke down so many times. I had the thought like I couldn't breathe. Like my therapist was just like, okay, like take a moment, and then tried to get me back on track and stuff. She was really great with that, but it's still like there's a moment in that session where I wanted to give up. There was a moment where I'm like, I told her I didn't want to do this. I told her that it's so hard. Like, I didn't want to keep going on with this session. It was just so painful. And I guess that's how kind of when you're working on a trigger, it's just bringing up so many things, and then you're just finding correlations between stuff, like the trigger with me at the bar getting grabbed by the guy and how it was the same action as John. It was just like that. And then it's you go through a number too. You're asked a number each time on a scale of 1 to 10, like how do you feel about this? 1 being the least and 10 being the most. And then from this session, I kind of started out from, I want to say like a 5, and then I went to an 8 after when I saw the vivid image of John. And then I probably went back down to a 5, then a 3, then I think I'm ending up at a 2. Because I was just able to see that not everyone is like John. He targeted my family, and I'm not going to just get attacked by a random person on the street or someone at the DMV. The chances of that are extremely low. So I'm just thinking more so about that, and so that helped me feel safer. And then at the end of the session, I brought in my figures, and this time I brought in my figure as my grandma as my wise figure, because I also feel like she was there maybe protecting me that day. And then I brought in my dog, of course, and then just me, my dog, and my grandmother, and I brought them into the scene of the attack with John. So it was just, I felt watched over looking back, and then I felt more peaceful. So it helped bring the level down to a 2 of anxiety. So that's how I felt about my next session, and I honestly had to think of something to really get me to go back, because it's just, I don't want to go through those emotions again. They're really hard, and I can't do it. So this is funny, but to associate therapy as a good thing and with something that I enjoy, I'm going to the fish place afterwards, and I got a saltwater aquarium. So every time after therapy, I go to the fish store, and I either get like something new for my tank, either like fish food, a fish if I don't have any, not coral, because you can't get coral after you set up your tank and everything, because then it resets your tank. So just get little things for the tank that I think the tank needs at that time. So it's really like a good thing to associate it with therapy, because it makes me happy, and then I want to go, and then after therapy I get to go to the fish store, and that's something that makes me happy. So if you're having an issue and you want to go do something that you enjoy after therapy, I recommend making that a regular occurrence. So I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about my therapy session and my thoughts on it and everything, and I will let you guys know what happens next week. So later, guys.